Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and as you will have seen from my video yesterday, the well-deserved reward for 2020 is the Super Chaffee, and in today's video I'm going to be letting you know whether it truly is a Super Chaffee or whether it's going to be the Super Crappy. It's been 6 years since a significantly younger looking fellow reviewed the Chaffee back when it was a Tech Tree Tier 5 American light tank. And many of you will remember the aspects that made the Chaffee just so great inside the game. It was the fact that it was Tier 5, could meet Tier 10, Tier 9 tanks, had pretty good standard penetration of 137 and 185 millimeters of premium penetration with pretty good accuracy, nice aim time, good gun handling, decent amount of view range. It was a little firecracker at Tier 5. Now, before we get stuck into the statistics on Tanks GG, I want to highlight that there have been a few changes in the last couple of days to the Super Chaffee statistics that are not updated yet on Tanks GG. And so please take the following into account when you're looking at this tank review and to listen to what I say, not just what is on the screen. So firstly, Wargaming decided to nerf the dispersion when this vehicle is moving and also when it's turning the tank by 30%. From 0.1 to 0.13. Also, Wargaming decided that the rate of fire was just too good, as they shaved off around a minute away from its DPM, dropping the damage per minute of this vehicle to about 1,550. Oof, it's not good. In addition to this, they also dropped the hit points by 10. So when we do our comparison of the Super Chaffee to the standard Tier 6 American light tank, which pretty much replaced the Chaffee back in the day, the T-37, and also I'm going to throw in the Cromwell Berlin to the mix. Sounds a bit weird, but really when you're going to be seeing in the gameplay, the way that the vehicles play out is not too different. Alright, so immediately we notice that the Super Chaffee, with its 1,550 damage per minute, is actually way worse than the T-37 and the Cromwell Berlin. And that is because while it has the same alpha damage as the T-37, it is actually firing over 2 rounds, nearly 2.5 rounds less per minute than the standard American light tank. And when you compare it to the Cromwell Berlin, it has a worse rate of fire, but also has 20 less alpha damage. So this vehicle doesn't even come close to competing with the other two tanks with regards to its damage output. Also, the penetration on this tank is disappointing compared to the other two vehicles. And if we look at the gold penetration, it's now 155, and this vehicle has to meet Tier 8 heavy tanks. You really want to be using the Cromwell Berlin with its 202, or alternatively the T-37 with its 160, compared to that abysmal premium penetration of 155 on the not so super Chaffee when we are only comparing its firepower. To add to this, the vehicle has a poor shell velocity compared to the T-37, but one thing it does have an advantage in is it carries quite a lot of ammunition, so you're going to take more than enough standard rounds and gold rounds that you probably won't be running out of them in the battle, so you've got enough for when you're against Tier 4 tanks and enough gold rounds for when you're against Tier 8 tanks. Okay, so now let's move on to the gun handling, and remember that the dispersion when moving has been nerfed, so it's actually worse than the T-37. So while the gun handling is definitely better than the Cromwell Berlin, and this vehicle can use vertical stabilizers to make that even more so, and it's got way better aim time as well, the accuracy really holds this vehicle back from engaging at decent distances. But one thing that this vehicle does have, however, is 10 degrees of gun depression, which is really nice, so you can work the ridge lines very well. I found when I was playing the Super Chaffee that even though the vehicle has that 1.7 seconds aim time, and I was using vertical stabilizers on the vehicle, with the nerf dispersion values and the fact that the turret traverse is worse than the T-37, you do feel like you're aiming for a long time, but not quite as long as the Cromwell Berlin. However, the Cromwell Berlin is faster forwards. It's practically the same speed backwards. The Super Chaffee does have an advantage with regards to its power to weight ratio, but the T-37 going faster forwards, faster backwards, better ground resistances, better traverse speeds, and in fact the Cromwell Berlin has better traverse speeds on all terrain apart from on soft terrain, making this light tank not feel very much like a light vehicle with regards to its mobility. Armor-wise on the Super Chaffee, it pretty much doesn't have any, so don't expect to be bouncing anything. And I can tell you, if you're a filthy player who's going to take advantage of the fact that there are a lot of these in the matchmaker, get in something that has about 50 or 60 millimeters of high explosive pen, and you are going to be going through one of these things pretty much every single time. And so go and pad away in your little Tier 4 to Tier 8 tanks with high explosive rounds, as there are a lot of Super Chaffies on the battlefield, at least for the next couple of days. So the hit points of this vehicle, 670, actually sorry, 660 now when we take into account the 10 nerf that this vehicle received. A little bit worse than the T-37 and the Cromwell Berlin. And it also has an engine with much less hit points than the other two tanks, so it will be more inclined to get knocked out. Although I personally haven't had mine knocked out in 8 games, because pretty much the 660 hit points this vehicle has means that you die before you've taken enough shells, usually for one of them to hit the engine. So let's talk about the camo rating this vehicle has, and it is slightly better than the T-37 when moving and when stationary, but it actually has worse camo when stationary than the Cromwell Berlin, but better camo when moving. And while its camo is certainly better than the Cromwell Berlin when moving, it's not really that much better, so that you would really want to sacrifice all of the firepower, all of the hit points, all of the penetration, and the armor, the mobility, pretty much the list goes on as to what you have to sacrifice if you want to have that extra little bit of camo when you're moving in the Super Chaffee compared to the Cromwell Berlin. The view range, however, at 380 is a nice little perk on the vehicle, and while it's not as good as the Chaffee was back in the day when it was at tier 5, originally the Chaffee had 420 meters view range, which then got rescaled down to 400 meters view range. I think actually maybe the Super Chaffee back in the day might have even had 440 or base view range or something stupid like that in the very, very, very early version of World of Tanks. All you really need to know is it's worse now. But while 380 is better than the competition and will allow you to get up to a very decent view range, just every other aspect of the vehicle just feels very mediocre. Anyway, I think it's best to show you the gameplay, right? But just before, let me clarify that this vehicle has an incredibly annoying crew loadout. It has 5 crew members, including a dedicated radio operator. And if you love the Sheridan at tier 10, or maybe you love the T-49 at tier 9, you're going to be quite frustrated because you're probably going to have to take a radio operator that's dedicated on the actual Chaffee itself at tier 5 to be able to put into your Super Chaffee. So first up, I'm going to play on mines, and this is where the top speed limit of the Chaffee definitely holds it back from being able to contest the early positions of the map. Nevertheless, I just really think that taking the hill is so important on the encounter that if you're in a fast vehicle like this, even with an EBR Hotchkiss, even with an SP-1C on the enemy team, that I wanted to take the risk to be able to try and take the hill. So we're going to get up into position, miss the A46 because we fired a little bit early, and luckily I've got a Hotchkiss with me as well. We put another round into the A46, he returns fire with a gold round, and I'm thinking, I'm heavier than this British medium tank, right? Yes, I am. I actually ram him for 234 damage, take 194 in return. We're down to 97 hit points this game, but, well, at least we managed to get rid of the threat, right? And remember, when you've got terrible damage per minute like you do in the Super Chaffee, I'm going to have to do that quite a lot through this video. I'm going to be calling this thing the Super Chaffee. Then you kind of want to try to avoid those all-in damage per minute trades. Alright, so 800 damage at the start of this game with a fire on the Hotchkiss, and this is why I decided to risk to take the hill, because once you got into this position, ooh, this is where you want to be. You want to be aiming down at your opponents who are trying to defend against the cap circle and have something definitely better that they need to be seeing to, aka protecting the cap and not really focusing on you. Okay, so I'm going to be able to get some cross shots here, and this is really where the Super Chaffee does actually feel like it's one of the better tier 6 light tanks out, until I bump myself on that rock and unable to get him. I just think to myself, why would I shoot the tier 6 medium tank that's trying to avoid me, and why don't I just shoot the tier 7 medium tank there? Now, funnily enough, on this vehicle, you might be interested in what equipment I'm using right now. I decided to go with coated optics, vents, and vertical stabilizers. I didn't even take a gun rammer on this vehicle because I felt as if, I just felt as if I wanted to try and maximize the other capacities of the tank. The tank's gun handling is so bad that I feel that if you don't take vertical stabilizers on this tank, you're always going to be aiming and you're not going to be very dynamic. I feel like you really need to have vents and coated optics on this vehicle as well if you want to be spotting your opponents at decent distances. You probably could drop the vents, you definitely can't drop the coated optics on this tank. What would you take instead? A gun rammer to try and make up for the vehicle's quite poor DPM? I found when I was playing this vehicle that mostly I was kind of just having to actually fire one shot and then pull back. Sometimes you'd be able to fire a double. I'm not sure if the gun rammer would allow us to fire a triple at our opponents, and I think that this tank has to be played quite carefully on a ridgeline to be able to get as much out of the game as it possibly can. Okay, so right now you can see the advantage of having the boosted view range here. We managed to spot the SP-1C, but unfortunately the horrific accuracy that this vehicle has at .44 is unable to be able to hit even that slightly large German light tank at decent distances. Looks like our second round probably went in there against the SP-1C, but I want to turn my attention to the self-propelled guns on the enemy team. And you might notice, well, the Chaffee's actually starting to pick up some damage in a game like this. Oh, don't quite manage to secure the kill on the self-propelled gun. But with a couple of kills to our name and 1,700 damage in the first 4 minutes, sure, this thing doesn't have, shall we say, Cromwell, Berlin damage per minute, but it's definitely no slouch either. All right, so the game's over, my team capped, so I decided to put 1 round in more into the SU-100, and yay, the T-34-85M shuts me down from the back of the map. In a lost game, I would add. So I just wanted to show you the Super Chaffee from this standpoint, to show you it's not the fastest thing. It definitely isn't going to be taking the early positions without taking a substantial amount of damage. It's not the most durable thing. Doesn't have the DPM, but at least it does have the gun depression, and it does have reasonable gun handling statistics if you're using vertical stabilizers. So next up, we're going to be playing on Empire's Border, and on this map there are lots of opportunities for you to be able to dominate at the beginning of the game. One position you could use would be that F5 area. If you were able to dominate the center of this location of this map, or the central location of this map, then you'll probably be able to spot any of the opponents that are going along the A line, as well as anyone who might be trundling their way towards the center. But for me personally, I just think that this G3 area is so important to be able to hold that I'm going to go there anyway in this vehicle. And also, you might notice that in this kind of a matchup where you're against Tier 5, Tier 6 and Tier 7 tanks, not too many vehicles on the enemy team do have armor. And so the penetration that this vehicle has of 120 on its standard rounds and 155 on its premium rounds isn't really going to hold me back too badly. So by getting up into this little nook here on the left, I can avoid the tank destroyers shooting me at the back. I put 1 into the VK, but I've got to watch out now. That is a German light tank who's going to be able to cause me some grief. We miss our shell, unfortunately, at the VK, but we managed to fire another round into him as he's retreating. Well, sorry, as he's trying to advance to me. And it looks like that VK has actually got a very small gun there. He's got 67 alpha damage and 75 on the second shell as well. So that means that I will actually be able to outtrade the VK. But I don't really want to trade 1 for 1. When you've only got 115 alpha damage, doesn't really make sense. So I try to get the T-29 on my team. I tried to ask him to come up here, bud. Come and use this hold down position. Surely, T-29, you're going to come up here. Go hold down against the Super Hellcat. You're going to get to farm the entirety of a lightly armored Tier 7 turreted tank destroyer. No, he wants to go around the other way and drive out in front of the IKV and probably the 2 artillery. Okay, whatever. I'm going to try and take the situation upon myself to try and get a cheeky shot into the Super Hellcat. And look, I might understand why Wargaming decided to nerf the gun handling of this vehicle just a little bit, maybe to make it inconvenient. I think that it could have probably stayed, and I think that they could have kept the Super Chaffee as what it used to be back in the day, which was this little brawling kind of light tank that would punch back against its opponents, but was very vulnerable as well at the same time. It wasn't the fastest, but it did have really good gun handling. And I feel like for Wargaming to kind of take that away from this vehicle at the last minute, just before they give it to us inside the well-deserved reward, does feel a little bit painful. But here we go. 1 shutdown there on the Super Hellcat. 2 shutdowns there on the VK2801, and we come up and we shut down the T-34 as well. Talk about a triple kill. Now we're going to be able to get the side of this Swedish tank destroyer, 1 into him, try and get above him, avoid the Su-85 by swinging a little bit to the left, but I just want to finish off that tank so badly that I'm willing to take a hit from this Su-85. 4 kills there against the IKV. Will we be able to pick up 5? Well, not quite, as the real dark horse that I didn't talk about, aka the Type 64, shows its ugly head. And yeah, really, if we're going to compare the Super Chaffee to the Type 64, which in retrospect is what I probably should have done instead of against the Cromwell Berlin, it's not really very fair. That tank has got the better view range, that vehicle has got the full premium status, so it will be making credits. Remember, this one's only going to be making mediocre credits as it is a reward vehicle, but you can still use all of your American light tank crews in it to be able to train. So I decide that the T-29, the Type 64, and the KV-1 will be able to handle that situation. And one thing I've learned, when you've only got about 20 millimeters of armor, is you don't really want to allow the self-propelled guns to stay alive for as long as possible, or not very long at all. So we're going to actually load high explosive rounds here. Look at what we're able to do with these HE rounds. Got to min-max that damage per minute of the vehicle. Now we've done 164, 163, and 152 damage there to the self-propelled guns. So I do like to take just a few HE rounds for when you do get into those scenarios where you can shut down artillery in 2 shots rather than 3. If we'd fired our regular rounds, we would have had to fire 3 rounds at them to be able to shut them down. By firing our high explosive rounds, we're actually able to take them out in 2 shots. So I would recommend taking 3 or 4 high explosive rounds in this vehicle. You do have enough ammunition to be able to do that, and it can be very useful for when you do manage to get into those duels. So the Super Chaffee. Top gun in this game? So in our first round on mines, we managed to get ourselves a first class for the 1,925 damage that we dealt, 980 base experience points, and because we didn't fire many or any gold rounds in that game, we make a 25,000 credits profit with a premium account. This is not a premium tank. 24,000 credits received with a premium account is not very good at all. You can crew train in this tank, but don't expect it to be a free tier 6 premium vehicle. In the next game, we get a Pascucci's medal for killing 2 self-propelled guns, a top gun for those 6 kills, and 1,642 damage gives us 1,091 base experience points. So we're able to actually outplay the Type 64 there, but I wonder if that was down to me just being more aggressive rather than the vehicle being better. And we make 29,000 credits profit because we didn't really use too many consumables or fire any gold rounds in that game either. But again, this isn't going to be making you bank. And trust me, when you start to get into those tier 8 games and you have to start firing the gold rounds at the front of the IS-3 and they start bouncing, you're going to be a little bit frustrated. Now look, I don't think anyone would expect Wargaming to make the Super Chaffee as good as the Type 64 and the Cromwell Berlin, considering they are premium tanks, and do we really want to have more and more overpowered vehicles given out to all of the most dedicated players of the game? Would it be a good idea to give everyone who has played the game for 4 years a very, very powerful light tank at this important period when people often quite come back to playing World of Tanks to go and smash through the mid-tier matchmaker? Well, probably not. But here's the deal for all of you, because I'm sure that you are all the dedicated players out there who are thinking, is this a great tank? Is it better than the Type 64? Is it better than the Cromwell Berlin? Well, clearly, remember, this is the buffed, while this is the unnerfed DPM of the Super Chaffee. It's going to go down to 1,550. The Type 64 pretty much has about 33% more DPM. It has better pen on its standard rounds. It has better pen on its premium rounds. It has better accuracy, the same gun depression, better dispersion when turning the turret, and better dispersion when moving. I'm not making a mistake. Remember, this got nerfed to 0.13. It goes faster forwards. It goes faster backwards. It has better ground resistances, which give it a better traverse speed. It has better view range. And it even has better camouflage when moving and when turning. To all intents and purposes, the Type 64 is a vastly superior tank to the Super Chaffee. And even the tech tree counterpart, the T-37, is better than the Super Chaffee. So would I be as bold as to call this thing the Super Crappy? I don't know. I've been told to never look a gift horse in the mouth, and this definitely is a gifted horse. It's given to us. It's just such a shame that something that used to be such a wonderful, incredible part of World of Tanks past, as the Chaffee, would have its name changed to the Super Chaffee, jumped up a tier, made worse, and put into the game in a state that's worse than all of the other vehicles that people would play at tier 6 that have an identical playstyle to this once great tank. And so there you have it, ladies and gents. That was my review of the Super Chaffee. Hope you all enjoyed this one. If you did and it was useful, give it a thumbs up. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments if you've played the Super Chaffee so far. Do you think that it's great? Do you think that it's absolutely awful? And how do you feel about Wargaming bringing it back in the game at a higher tier with worse statistics than it used to have and inferior statistics to all of the common premium tanks at tier 6 anyway? And if you're watching this video as it goes live on Thursday, happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I'm going to celebrate Thanksgiving in the UK by going on the North American server right now and just seeing if it's as the Wild West of World of Tanks as a lot of the people who play on the European server make it out to be. So look forward to seeing you all there. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.